Hello and welcome to Baltic Security Conference. I am Baltmanis and I'm responsible for stage number 2, which is this one. And if you're here, it means that you are into occupational and fire safety and civil protection. And our next event is very serious matter. The second part of the conference, which is starting now, opens with a speech of newly appointed Chief of the State Fire and Rescue Service of Latvia, who will be presenting a very topical presentation on risk management, emerging risks and threats, and lessons for civil protection in wartime. So please welcome warmly Colonel Baltmanis. Martin, good luck.
Thank you. Thank you very much for introduction, and thank you very much for having me here. My presentation will consist of 2 parts. So the first part will be related to the risk management and maybe, I would say, complex things such as emerging risks or new risks. And the second part, more about the civil protection during the wartime. And just to ensure that we are on the same page during my presentation, I will start with some terms. And the first term what I would like to speak is the hazard. So what we can see, I understand that, oh, yeah, okay. So the hazard, we all see from the definition, actually, and it's taken from the United Nations disaster risk reduction terminology. We can see that it's process or phenomenon which is cause some consequences to the human life or to the environment or to the property. And we can agree actually that, for example, storm, we can agree that this fits or match to the definition of the hazard. But then, when we want to say that the storm is a disaster, so we can see the first part of the term disaster is the same as a hazard. But then there is one criteria, and it's a second part of the definition. It means that our daily resources which we have in order to respond to the storm are exceeded. So only then we can say that storm is not a hazard anymore, but it is a disaster. But my presentation is about risk assessment. And then we come to the term of risk. And here we see 2 very essential aspects. We can call the storm only then as a risk, only then when we have assessed the possibility of the storm and we have assessed the possible consequences of the storm. And this is the difference. And this process calls this risk assessment. I have added also one word, the plausibility, but I will talk about it at the end of this slide. And then we have a risk management. So the coordinated measures, which is very similar to disaster management, actually definition. And basically what we want with the preventive and preparedness measures, we want to decrease the likelihood of the particular risk, and with the response measures and measures for an elimination of consequences, we want to be ready to respond in case of risk. So, but why I added this word plausibility? So if we want to assess the risk, so we need the data. And regarding our today's presentation, which is related to the new or emerging risks. So basically, the emerging risks is something we haven't seen before. So we haven't faced the new risk. This is the definition from one source. And then maybe the plausibility is the only way how we can assess the possible likelihood of the new risk and possible consequences of the new risk. And plausibility mainly relies on experience and knowledge of experts from particular area. And if we look to the past, basically, there are quite often the new risks or emerging risks, when they occur, they become to the crisis. Because we haven't identified them during the risk assessment process. And for crisis, I think the best definition is that simultaneously, we don't have a time. There is a very high uncertainty. So, and we can see there is this similarity with the emerging risk definition as well, because there is a high uncertainty about the consequences. And we are insufficient in our capacities and capabilities. So, and when the new risks or emerging risks occur, we start to use another terms. We start to use term black swan. So basically, where we can describe the occurrence of black swan is accidental. So you can see, and I put the black swan, but the probability is very low, but the consequence is very high. Or we can call it gray rhino, where the likelihood or probability is very high, and consequences at the same time are very devastating or severe, we can say. And for example, where to put we all face the pandemic. So, and if you read different sources, we can see it's identified like a black swan, but actually in 2003, we have faced the SARS viruses. So, and also, there are some Hollywood movies regarding the pandemic. One of them is Outbreak, which was launched in 1995, about the possible consequences which pandemic can cause. And I think maybe pandemic is more gray rhino than black swan. However, I'm not complaining, I would say, anyone, that we haven't assessed the pandemic. The whole world, I would say, was affected by this pandemic. And at the same time, I can say there are a lot of disasters or risks that had happened, and we say, oh, this was a new risk, or this was an emerging risk, and then it transfers to the black swan or gray rhino, which is actually not an excuse, but it shows how complex it is to identify new risk or emerging risk. And I put some examples. So you can see also this pandemic example, but also the volcano eruption in Iceland in 2010. So does anyone include the volcano eruption and the consequence or impact of the volcano eruption ashes to the airplanes in their risk matrix? I don't know. I'm sure that Latvia didn't include it in their risk assessment. Actually, if we go back to this slide, at that time, in 2015, when we did the first risk assessment, the pandemic flu was in a medium risk, not in a black swan area or gray rhino area. But again, so now it's included in risk matrix. Now it's not anymore, I mean, the volcano eruption and ashes which cascade the effects to the air traffic. So now it's not included in anything. It's not emerging risk. Or also we failed actually in risk assessment. I put it in 2013, the collapse of shopping mall. So it wasn't included actually in our risk assessment. But we have the building codes, so we couldn't imagine that something like this could happen actually as a risk. We failed, and Italy also failed. We all know about this bridge collapse in Italy in 2018. And in both cases, there were a lot of fatalities. In Latvia, it was 54. In Italy, it was 43. And also, we can talk about Fukushima, nuclear crisis. And again, the Japan, we all know, it's prone to earthquakes. And actually, the Fukushima nuclear power plant was built to resist the earthquake. It was built to resist the earthquake, and it resisted the first earthquake. But then there was a second earthquake, which caused a tsunami. And tsunami hit the nuclear power plant. And again, and this caused the emergency and spread of radioactive sources from the nuclear power plant. Now we can call it's a risk, but at that time it was new risk, and then in some sources we can find it's a black swan or gray rhino. In 2021, the huge floods in Europe, which actually caused 243 fatalities in Europe. We have early warning systems. We always talk about risk assessment. We talk about planning, about relief, contingency, and resources. But it happened. So, and also, this year, Turkey, which is also a country prone to the earthquakes. But again, we are coming back to these building codes. So, with this, I want to say it's not an excuse that we cannot identify the new or emerging risks, but it shows how complicated actually is this process actually, and how high is uncertainty in order to identify the new or emerging risks. But at the same time, this is one of the best document I have found related to the new or emerging risks. It's issued by the World Economic Forum. Basically, what we see, it was kind of their methodology was to survey more than 1,200 experts around the world, from businesses, from the academia, from the government institutions, in order to understand what are the new or emerging risks in short term, so in 2 years, and what are the emerging risks in 10 years. And actually, this document is very comprehensive because it does not include only the risks related to the disasters or maybe hazards, which is the risks we are dealing more in our daily work. I mean the state fire rescue services, emergency medical services, but it shows us what other risks can happen, which can make an impact actually to the disaster management, to the risk assessment. So, and basically what we see, for example, and basically they have went through the 32 possible risks, and they have graded them according to the severity. So in 2 years, so the most severe risk, as they assessed, is cost of living crisis. So the crisis raise the cost of our living, and we feel it today, actually. We feel it today with inflation. Yeah? And again, it's making an impact to the responders as well, and to the society as well. Or we can see also, in the longer term, the most severe actually risk is failure for adaptation or mitigation of climate changes. So we have a Paris Agreement where the countries agreed to reach some goals, and also we have a Sendai framework related to disaster risk reduction, where also we have 7 targets that we want to achieve till the 2030, so in disaster risk reduction. So many risks as well. Migration risk, maybe, which we can see in 2 years term, it's a number 10, but still, it's a high because they went through 32 risks. But in the 10 years, we can see it's a fifth risk taking into account the severity. So if you are very interested, it's publicly available. So, and it's a very interesting document. But what to do with new or emerging risks, actually? I think my suggestion is there is no need so much focus maybe on possibility or probability or likelihood of the risk, what can happen, and what is the frequency that the particular risk occur, but more focus on consequence management. For example, actually it doesn't matter if the electricity disruption is caused by the storm, for example, or it's caused by the technological problems. So the main focus is how we are able, the society and institutions, how the society and institutions are able to cope with the consequences that we don't have electricity. Of course, don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying that we have to skip this essential part in risk assessment process, where we try to identify the likelihood, the plausibility of the particular risk. No, but I'm talking about that we more focus how we can manage the consequences, our capacity and capability. And this also relates actually to the second part of my presentation about the wartime. Of course, there is certain dangerous aspects which are completely different if you compare with disasters. But again, if we talk about the evacuation in case of floods, so our ability as a society, as an institution's ability to perform evacuation and implement evacuation, the procedures, what is the difference, I mean, if we compare in case of war, if we want to implement? So the main aspect, what I'm saying, we have to focus on consequence management. Doesn't matter what cause actually these consequences. More, are we able to cope with these consequences? And so we go to the civil protection. And again, I should start with the terms and definitions, because the first time when the civil protection was introduced, or we can see it was a civil defense, so term, it was set up in Geneva Convention in additional protocols to Geneva Convention in 1977. And even at that time, actually, the definition of civil defense, it wasn't only about the war. We can see, yeah, it's protect the citizens against the war or military invasion, but also other disasters. We can see, I have underlined. So so at that time, the civil defense wasn't only about the response in case of war or protection of civilians in case of war, but also about the protection of civilians in case of any disaster. And we can see actually these tasks of civil defense at that time. We can see the firefighting, which is now very, very related to the disaster management. We can see evacuation, we can see warning. Of course, there are separate tasks which more relate to the wartime, like sheltering, like management of blackout measures to the houses and so on. But still, at that time, actually, civil defense meaning wasn't only about the war. And the interesting thing is, in English we have a civil defense, we have a war defense, and we have a war protection. But actually in Latvian we have only one word. We can use only one word, and our perception is completely different. And I think for all of you, your perception, if you hear civil protection or civil defense, is completely different, even within the professionals. I'm not talking about the society, where it's completely different. But again, European Union used the term the civil protection. They use the term civil protection. And you can see there's the rule of law, it's Lisbon Treaty, where there is a separate article related to the civil protection, 176C. So, and this article says, or it set up actually procedures related only to the disasters. There is nothing within the European Union, Union Civil Protection Mechanism about the protection of civilians during the wartime. So, and then I add also the definition of civil protection of Great Britain, which is could be related to the different type of threats. And it's again, it's a decision of the country how they want to define their civil protection, whether it's separate, I mean defense and protection, whether it's common. And I think also one suggestion for my point, I don't think that any country can establish separate resources, one for civil defense and another for civil protection. So it should be harmonized. I mean, again, we come back to this consequence management. It doesn't matter what cause the consequences. Matters are we able to cope with these consequences. And of course, I've put the lessons or challenges actually and information from the Ukraine, ongoing war actually. Of course, and civil protection during the war, we can talk about a lot of challenges actually during the wartime and Ukraine faced. So in the first 5 days, I put an empty chair. There were a lot of institutions where no one came to the work. In the first 5 days, there wasn't a police in the work. If you want to ensure the service, there wasn't a police. Or we couldn't reach by phone anyone. If we want to call someone, so we could reach and ask for help and ask for assistance. It's also dangerous service, where the civilians can't go back if there's no threat anymore, or devastated infrastructure, road infrastructure which we use for evacuation, or which we use actually to protect the country. And also availability of critical infrastructure, heating system, water system, electricity, so food, water, and waste management as well. And also, since I'm a firefighter, the environment where the emergency services have to work, the environment is completely different. And now, firefighters and rescuers in Ukraine, they use also the bulletproof vests. It's additional 20 kilograms to their daily equipment. And they use, instead of firefighting helmets, they use the military helmets. Because 68 firefighters, rescuers were killed in Ukraine while they're performing firefighting and rescue works. So, and these are huge challenges actually. But at the same time, this wartime, it's a huge uncertainty. We can talk that we can prepare plans, and I like this quote, which was said by one of the presidents of the United States of America, Dwight Eisenhower. Plan is nothing, planning is everything. So we can plan our actions in case of wartime, but at the same time, we have to answer the question if the warfare will be the same as it was in previous war. It won't be the same. And if we think that that our enemy or invader will tell us where will be the attack, I think we fail as well. What I want to say, if today maybe we see on a map, so this is our gathering point. So this is a safe place where you can go and you will be picked up and maybe transferred to the safe place. Then maybe in this case, in the wartime, taking into account the information from the intelligence, it's not the safe place anymore. Or even the shelter maybe. At the peacetime, it's a safe place. But at the wartime, taking into account different threats which can be caused by this, is not, and you shouldn't go there, actually. So, because usually society, the question is, where should I go? So I want to see the map where I can go to the safe place. But actually we don't know where the attack will be and what will be the attack, what the warfare will be. But again, what Ukraine shows, this intelligence information, it was released very quickly. So it's publicly available information that Ukrainian institutions and ministries, they receive the instructions what to do and where will be the threatened area 4 days before the invasion. And for the NATO countries, taking into account all allies and all information which will be available, so we have some time to adapt our plans. Again, don't misunderstand me that there is no need for a plan in this case. No. But we have to be flexible and adapt the plan taking into account the current threats and current territory which is in threats. Definitely notification of the public. This is one of the most essential, I would say, measure that should be in place. It doesn't matter which one of them we use. So, and in case of disaster, we use it, but civil protection, again, context with this harmonization of resources, again, this early warning system should be connected with the air defense system. So the time between the information we receive that there is missile attack should be as short as possible in order to notify the public. And we can use different means. And Ukraine shows that they use different tools to notify public. And a lot of them, they are created by non-governmental organizations or by the private sector, actually, and used in Ukraine. The next, we can discuss what is the difference between evacuation and controlled movement, because in case of disaster, okay, we are talking about the evacuation. In case of war, we are talking more about the controlled movement, because we have also deconflict, the available resources, the available routes with the military side. But again, in a planning process, this survey actually was done in the United States of America. Of course, the survey was done by asking questions regarding the hurricanes. So what would be the reaction of the citizens in case of hurricane? But I think this is one of the important information we can ask today, actually, to the society, just to understand how to control movement. Because what we can see from this survey, this data is from United States of America. Again, it can be different in Latvia. But again, we all have, not all, but the mostly of the people, they have their own cars. So, and if we want to evacuate one territory where we have, for example, 50,000 or 100,000 population, so we have to take into account that they have their own transportation. It means that in notification, I should tell the safe route or safe direction, instead of maybe gathering people, all the people in gathering points. And then again, if we talk about transportation means, again, there is no need to plan transportation for 100 people, but we can plan transportation for the less people. Or again, about temporary accommodation. And we saw it actually in Jēkabpils, during the floods in Jēkabpils in Latvia. A lot of people, they didn't use the temporary accommodation place which was proposed by the municipality. No, they used the friends, the relatives. They use the hotels. So again, it doesn't mean that we have to accommodate 100,000 people. Of course, there are aspects about our geographical territory, which is completely different if we compare with Ukraine, the deep of our geographical territory, and the threat. It should be taken into account if we talk about the evacuation or controlled movement. And I have to be pragmatic. I think there won't be the situation that we will control the movement of population or we control the evacuation. No, there will be chaos, I would say. But at the same time, what we can see from the survey, the person with disabilities, which we feel right now when we're supporting the Ukrainian refugees. So this is also the challenge, actually, on how to accommodate them. It's completely different needs for those people. For people who leave the country, actually, they don't stay, they use by the home, they leave the country. And people who refuse to, actually, this survey also show the data that if you want to, of course, in case of war or disaster, we will declare the special legal regime. But again, this survey shows the possibility of the evacuation if it's forced evacuation. If we introduce or require the forced evacuation, the possibility that person will evacuate is only 2% higher. So, and we felt it actually also in the Jēkabpils floods. But then, of course, we can't compare floods with the war, but still, we have to use this data actually. What will be the probable reaction of the society? Because obviously, there is no institution or municipality which have a huge, garages with buses and so on, that we can ensure evacuation of everyone. So we have to collect as many data as possible to understand what is possible action of the society and use them when we prepare our plans. And at the same time, when we ask something like this to the society, to the individual, so individuals start to think as well. Okay, they ask me this question, okay, what I'm going to do. So maybe it raises an interest in the individual. And also, of course, we have to take into account that we have hospitals which should be organized. Because we need special resources to evacuate people from the hospital to hospital, or social care institutions or prisons. So this is a separate plan which should be divided from the evacuation of population, the major part of the population. And then also something which relates to the disaster. Also, one example from Latvian side, we had a huge fire in a flat apartments, and we saw on Facebook, on media, that there was published a picture of this fire. And then we compare when was the first call to 112 center. It was 2 minutes after the picture was published in a Facebook. So people, instead of calling to 112, asking for help and response, they are taking pictures and they are publishing them on social media. So again, the behavior, but what Ukrainians do, basically, they ask not to take pictures about the consequences. Because actually the invaders, they don't know if they reach their goal. If they hit the infrastructure they wanted. So, and then again, they can escalate their narratives and propaganda actually, taking into account this information and understand if their actually target was reached. Of course, what we can do, again, we have to organize exercise, we have to organize trainings to the state institutions, to the municipalities or involved actors. But not only our country, but as in Sweden, Norway, Singapore, all countries actually introduced this concept where every individual has to be prepared for the first 72 maybe hours. And also, this yellow booklet was introduced in 2015, so we included 8 main threats which can occur in Latvia and how to act in case of these 8 main threats. Then the Ministry of Defense, they continue with the new brochure where they include how to more act in a wartime. And then we did a survey, actually, and we asked people, do you know how to act in case of fire? And 92% of Latvian population said, yeah, we know how to act in fire. It's quite high percentage, I would say. Of course, it's a survey. It's a feeling of the individual if the person knows how to react. But then we ask the question, do you know what to do in case of chemical or radiological accident? And only 43% said, yeah, I know how to act. But this action is included in both brochures. And the next question was, and we did this survey in 2021, before the Ukraine happened. I mean the full invasion. And we asked, do you know what to do in case of war? Only 31% of people said that I know what to do in case of war. But without the society, we cannot, I would say, manage the consequences and provide, I would say, civil protection in case of war. So the society, as it is a crucial part of the civil protection in a wartime and also in the disasters. And what Ukrainian colleagues say, decentralize as much as you want, as you can. Decentralize. So that people on site don't wait for the orders, they act. They are able to act. They know how to act. Also, I want to be pragmatic. There won't be the situation when everyone, 100%, will know how to act in case of disaster or wartime. No. I don't know any country where there is such a numbers. But this is the key. And something what I definitely want to say, and which I felt it during the pandemic when Latvia faced it, the SARS-CoV-2 virus. I felt it during our support to Ukrainian refugees in Latvia, the importance of non-governmental organizations, the importance of their support to the state and municipal institutions. And also Ukraine shows the same. The non-governmental organizations and society as it is, they are very resistant and able to respond by themselves, or coordinate particular measures by themselves. And I think our, as a state institution, task is to talk with them, describe and explain what is the procedures, what is the responsibility of service, emergency medical service, municipality, and how they can help, and what is the procedure. Thank you.
Thank you. And if you were wondering what the action behind you is going on, that was our school kids learning first aid. So we're doing the job all together.
It's good.
So, any questions, please, or comments on this? Anybody? Yes, I was listening to you saying decentralizing. It should be some kind of state of mind or state of society which believes that they have a choice, that they can take responsibility. Is there anything we can do to encourage it? Because sometimes you see in the situations of crisis when people are just standing around and watching, and then you need at least someone who would start to do something, and then suddenly everyone jumps on.
As I said, I don't believe that we will reach the situation that 100% of population will be able to act. But again, how we can improve it? Two weeks ago, we did a training to the non-governmental organizations. And I actually don't know how to translate it to English. It's so in Riga or in big cities they have a suburbs.
Yeah.
And then the active people they establish non-governmental organizations. They call it apkaimes.
Yeah, societies.
Suburbs. And we did a training for them. We did it together with a non-governmental organization. We prepare a scenario and prepare a particular task for them. And task was, for example, I need to transport people from point A to point B. Are you able to manage it from starting till the end?
Those are societies you can find on Facebook, for example,
yeah.
Where there are people from the local area.
Yes. And then if we involve them, so they promote somehow, I would say, this activity. And as I said before, at the end of my presentation, so we have to involve them in our procedures. If we organize the training or exercise for state institutions or municipality, involve them in these trainings or exercise, they understand what we are doing, what is the responsibility of municipality, and how they can support the state or municipal institutions. So I think this is talking and communicating and explaining what we are going to do, what municipality is going to do, what is our capacity, what is our threshold, and how you can help.
And actually saying that you are also allowed to take initiative in this.
Definitely.
Colonel, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much.